I'm Lori McIlvain from Hallmark Title. For those of you that aren't familiar with Hallmark, we have been providing settlement services in the Dayton, Ohio area since 1992. We're located in Fairborn. We work with all lenders. We've worked with most real estate companies and lenders here in town and throughout the United States as well. So we look forward to working with all of you moving forward too. So I'm here to talk to you about the new Good Funds law that came into effect on April 6th. So it's just been about 2 weeks now. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, just what the law says, what the rules are, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how this is going to affect you in your transactions and with your customers, and then I want to give you some tips on some ways to keep things running smoothly, and then we'll touch a little bit on cybersecurity that I think is becomes a big issue now with these new rules. So first of all, I think most of you have probably heard if parties in your transaction are going to be bringing an aggregate amount of $1,000 or more, it's going to have to come to the title company, the settlement services, in the form of a federal wire. So that means they can't bring cash. They can't go to the bank and say, well, the title company has an account at PNC and I have an account at PNC, so how about if I just have the teller take money out of my account and put it in the title company's account? Makes perfect sense. That's not allowed either. ACH, that many of you might be familiar with, that's not allowed. So there's the FedWire sort of CHIPS system that's out there, and when funds are wired, they become immediately available for withdrawal to the recipient. So that's the caveat. The funds have to be immediately available to use at the time of closing before anything can be dispersed. What does this mean to you? Well, you want to educate your clients up front, because for most people, for most individuals, to have a wire transferred isn't something that they do on any regular basis. So you just want to educate your parties that they'll need to check with their banks well in advance and find out what's going to be involved in getting a wire transfer. That's probably the biggest thing that you need to do up front. In terms of your earnest money, as long as it's in a escrow account at your real estate firm, nothing changes. It doesn't matter if your earnest is $500 or $10,000. As long as it's coming from a real estate escrow account, nothing changes. We can still accept that. So it's going to be money that's outside of that your borrowers are bringing. It does take time. Also, for funds, you have to realize it takes time for funds to go through the federal wire system. So you want to start thinking about when you're setting up your closings and your closings time. If you have parties who are trying to sell their house in the morning and buy another house in the afternoon, that's not going to work anymore. There has to be enough time so that money can transfer from the first party to the second party and things get wired in between. That type of thing usually, we're saying give it 24 hours. So I want to strongly encourage you to discourage those situations where we have same day and back-to-back closings. Oh, okay.
Funds are available immediately. It's the federal wire.
Yes.
Now they're not available immediately?
If there's a federal wire, they will be immediately available. But let's say, is your question related to back-to-back closing? So let's say that you have the first party, they're selling their house, and maybe they're going to get their proceeds in a check, because that's pretty common, right? Okay, so now, and then maybe it's noon, but they have a moving van in the driveway, and they're ready to move out and take their stuff to the house that they're buying at 3 o'clock. Well, now they have a check. That check isn't going to be good. They're going to take it to the bank. Their bank is going to say, well, we're going to put a hold on this. When you get into situations like that, what you're going to have to do is have your buyer, who's next going to be the seller, they're going to ask in the first transaction, can that title company either wire the funds, the seller proceeds, to their account or to the next title company if they're if there's another title company involved, they'll want to wire their funds to that title company. Now, when you do that, and it works, but there's all kinds of security stuff that has to happen, it takes time, and each person down the line's got to verify. They're all going to be super careful. It's really hard to do that. It's nearly impossible to do that in the same day. If you maybe it would work if there was like an 8 a.m. closing and a 4 p.m. closing, depending on many, many other factors that are involved. Did I answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes.
So the bottom line is we're going to suggest to the client that they can't do that? Sell one day and buy the next? Or are we going to let 2 days go by?
You should be able to pull it off from one business day to the next. But I would discourage it, because what you don't want, because it's so emotional, right, anyway, down at the table when people are buying and selling, and it's very stressful. Most of us have done it. It's horrible. Moving is horrible, and selling your house and moving the money, and it's so confusing and all the paperwork. So you don't want to add to that, that at the last minute somebody finds out that they don't really have access to their money, or they're not going to get their money in time for the next deal, and the moving van is waiting, and that kind of stuff. You don't want that emotion at the last minute. And we can't move mountains. We try. Most of the title companies really try, but we can't.
Well, the buyer should really never take a check, because some banks might take 5 days.
I think it depends on their situation. If you have a buyer that says they want a check, but that they're trying to do, I'll usually ask people, are you involved in another transaction in the next day or two? And you want to tell them, did you think about the fact that your bank is going to hold those funds? You're not going to have access to those. So that's the kind of stuff where you guys want to point those things out, because your buyers and sellers, they don't know. They do this a few times in their life maybe, and with laws changing and on all the things that they have to keep in mind, you don't want a panic situation down at the last minute.
What are the hours that the federal government processes them, and what's the cutoff?
That's a great point. So it's 8 to 5. However, there's no set amount of time that it takes money to transfer. I do wires almost every day, and sometimes I see them go right through, and I think, well, maybe that was because it was a big bank to a big bank, and other times it'll be a big bank, and I don't know why it took an hour. It could take longer. There are reasons why the feds might hold a wire. They won't necessarily disclose that to us, but there are situations where somebody's name could be similar to one on a watch list, or we'll get a call back from the bank. We notice that you're sending a wire to this person, and that's not usual for you to do. Well, of course it's not, because this is the first time they ever bought a house, but they want to grill us on how did you get the information? How do you know these people? How did you get the information? Are you sure this is the right amount of money? Who in your office put the wire in? Did you have anybody else approve it? If that happens, and that's a random thing, that could hold it up for a couple of hours. So it goes to the whole same day. You want to avoid the same day closing. You could still have a problem the next day if funds got held for somebody's name for some reason, but that doesn't happen that often.
If the two closings happen, if they were both using the same title company,
Mhm.
the same checking account, could
That would help tremendously, especially if it was Hallmark, because we would we would do our very best, and we know this is happening, so we have a way of kind of moving money behind the scenes from one file to another. Yeah, that's a very good point.
What are you going to charge the buyer if he wants to use a wire funds?
I can only speak for Hallmark, so I don't know what other title companies do, but we don't charge. So we do that as a courtesy. As a courtesy, we'll do that. There is an expense involved, and it's pretty costly. The steps that are involved for us to send a wire are pretty involved, but we'll do it as a courtesy. Mm-hmm.
Are there any days of the week, especially Fridays, when the banks have a cutoff time for doing certain things?
It's Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. I wouldn't, and I've sent wires at 5, and I've sneaked them through at 5. I don't know why. Sometimes I'll even go through at 5:15 or 5:30. You don't want to wait that late because that's just super risky. And it might be okay if you're closing another transaction the next day at noon, but we've got up until 5, but I would say you're pushing it after 3. So we just don't know how long it's going to take for it to go through.
And you say that it could close on Saturday?
Saturday is, no money moves through the feds on Saturday, so it's Monday through Friday. And same with holidays are also, so you could close dry. You could, I mean, if you had to, but there wouldn't be any money.
Your next day is Monday.
Yes. Yeah,
I want to be sure about that.
right. But if you have to do something on a Saturday, you could close dry, and that's another thing. If something goes wrong at the end, and you're going to be in, every situation's different, but if something goes awry at the end, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't close, you just can't disperse, and that might be okay in some situations. It depends on everybody's circumstances.
If the buyer is giving you the earnest money, not to verbally innate, that still has to be wired to any amount.
Yeah, it seems crazy, and I'm glad that you asked that question because that's a good one. So what if somebody gives the title company their funds like 45 days in advance and they brought it in cash, but if it's over $1,000, we still can't accept it. As much as that seems to defy common sense, cash, we can't take cash, for instance. It's got to come, if it's,
As long as it's $1,000, they can give you a personal check.
if it's over, you're saying under 1,000? If the funds are $1,000 or less, they can write us a personal check. So we'll take that, or cash. You know, it's the wire is for over $1,000, which most of the time in a purchase we're going to see over $1,000. If something changes near the end, and there's a nominal amount that, let's say they've wired us $1,500, and then we find out 2 days in advance a proration change, and now it's $1,675, they can write a check for the $175. They could bring that. Because that's my bigger fear, the way things seem to change down to the last couple of days with prorations and that sort of thing. It makes it very difficult. We don't always know our numbers.
What the typical fee bank charges for the customers to do the wire?
I don't know for sure. I know what I've heard. I've heard 25 to 40. It's expensive. Most, in a cash situation, this wouldn't apply, but most people that are going through a lender, the lenders are aware of this. They're trying to work with their customers right from the very beginning. So at Hallmark, when we get a title order, right up front, we send a notice off to all the parties and to especially the buyers and say, you're going to have your funds wired if they're more than $1,000. So we're telling you now that at least 2 weeks before your closing date, go to your bank and find out what steps you have to take to get money wired. We're asking lenders to do the same thing. So a lot of lenders are telling their customers, get your money to me at the bank, and I'll take care of it getting, wired over to the title company. That's the best situation, when the lender kind of moves it along for them. And I'm seeing that a lot. And we're asking lenders to do that because it's hard for people. So, and then this brings up the whole thing. One of our biggest fears is cybersecurity, and realtors, title companies are big targets for cyber theft. One of the more common scams that are going on right now is where your email traffic is monitored by a criminal. I've seen 2 of these just this year. We had one maybe a month ago. So it's like this. You're emailing back and forth with your customer, and okay, it looks like we're going to be good. We're going to close on Thursday. And did you get your money? Yeah, I've got my money ready to wire to the title company. And then some thief is monitoring your email traffic and mimics your email, goes back to your customer and says, oh, I just found out that I had the wrong instructions that I gave you to wire your funds. It's supposed to be this instead. And then, really it's a criminal, it's the wrong instructions, the people go in, they send their funds, and that's the scam game. So what you want to do is be very alert to your emails. Really watch this. Same thing comes back to the realtor. You could get an email that you think is from the bank or the loan officer or from the title company that says, oh, we changed our wiring instructions and this is what they are, so you be sure and let your customer know. If any time that you get any email communications about money, moving money, account numbers, anything, you should never follow it. You should 100% of the time check with the party that's involved. So like if it was Hallmark, I would say to you, don't call the phone number that's in the email, don't reply to it, get online or ask somebody that you know, what's the phone number, or if you've got my business card, use that phone number, call, and we'll verify, because we will not be emailing and changing stuff. I'll tell you that right now, and the other title companies won't. That is not how we're going to tell you that wiring instructions have changed. So you should be very suspicious of that, and you want to tell your customers to be very suspicious. No, I mean, if somebody transfers, if someone knowingly goes in and transfers money based on some email they have, then yeah, it's going to be for them. I mean, you can call the FBI, but this stuff is so common, it happens. And I think, to your point, as much as you can educate yourself, there are some tip-offs. But I'm sure just as the day that we think we have it figured out, the one that I had recently, the language, it was worded kind of weird, and the sender, who was mimicking somebody that we knew, was acting kind of aggressive in the email, like, well, my customer's getting mad, can you hurry up? And I thought, this guy usually is really laid back. He's usually like so laid back. I'm like, come on. And now he's kind of aggressive. That seemed odd. And when I hovered my mouse over the email address, I was like, that's not his email. I just happen to know this person's email. But why? Because, you get so many emails from people you wouldn't expect yourself to remember, but I knew that one didn't make sense. So you have to be suspicious of everything, and you won't be able to figure it out. So use this rule. If I get an email, and tell your customers, if you get an email that is discussing how to move money, just don't follow it until you verified it. We send out the form that I mentioned that we send out to our customers in the very beginning. Probably, if they really read it, and they probably don't, it's probably scary because it includes our wiring instructions. And then I say, but don't believe this. Call our office because we email this thing. So don't ever take wiring instructions by email. Always call a number that you have on file. Check with your loan officer to verify these. I think with lots of people who never have to send wires out there, the criminals are going to be like, this is heyday. Like, I'm just going to start checking. Hotmail, Gmail's not as bad, but the free email accounts are prime targets too. I think they're easier, apparently, for criminals to hack into. Strong passwords, changing passwords, those kinds of things are important. What other question? Yes?
Where does closing protection come into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And closing protection coverage covers the person the insured against if the title company were to do something dishonest, run off with the funds, not follow the closing instructions, that sort of thing. But it doesn't cover sending, your party just sending the money to the wrong place. That's nothing that the title company did. I think this will be an evolving situation because we used to say that now we're back to, at least at Hallmark, now we like paper checks again. Like, we used to not like paper checks a couple of years ago, and we had all kinds of counterfeit. People were reprinting checks, and we've had several waves of that. Now we have fraud protection software that protects us from that. All of our paper checks, we could throw them in the middle of the street and nothing can clear unless we've approved it. So now we want to use paper checks again. But
And you'll take cash now too?
we'll take
$50,000 cash, whatever?
I can't take 50,000. If it's over $1,000, it has to be a wire.
So is that combined, so if we're holding $500 in escrow and we return it at closing and he uses it, can he only bring 500 more, or?
You mean 500 for your earnest? That's sort of out of the picture. You could have 500, as long as the earnest money held in a trust account from a real estate firm is treated the same way that it is now, and that'll be totally separate. So as long as what they have to bring in addition to, so this is where I know you guys are like, well, we should start collecting more earnest money, and then we could tell them, yeah, I don't think that would fly, but so if they have to bring a total of $1,750 and you have $1,000 in earnest, yeah, then they can write a personal check for $750 and you can put the two together. We always want to know how you're handling your earnest, if you're bringing it or if you're backing it out of your commission. Those are always things that we want to try to have correctly on the settlement at the end. Did you have a question? Oh, yes?
It sounds to me like, if I'm understanding what you're saying, when we get to that point where we're talking about money and the transfer of money, we might be better off to eliminate liability for both us as agents and the brokers to get completely out of the conversation and have them, the clients, talk directly to you.
You can always have anybody. I'm happy to talk to any customers, especially because people are going to be worried and concerned. They're already kind of concerned about what's going on. And then to find out that they have to send a wire, and then to find out that, you know, these are the instructions you should follow, but we want you not to believe them and to check them out. That's a really scary thing. So I'm always happy to talk to anybody. I'm probably going to ask them some security questions too. I'm probably the toughest in our office, and I'm not very popular for it because I see so much of it, but I'll kind of grill people, but I do it in a nice way. I try. That's right. And realtors, title companies are huge targets because criminals know that we're dealing with many, many, many people and many different names, many, you know, that everybody's new or could potentially be like new to you. We have to look at every contact that we make as a potential customer, and we're trying to be really polite and, you know, this sort of thing. So it's a lot of realtors. We see it with realtors a lot. Probably every week we get crazy emails from a realtor, and we're like, that's not really them, because I don't think that they would say that or send that. And then a couple days later we start getting emails from them for real that are like, I'm sorry, don't, you know, I got hacked. And when that kind of thing happens too, it could be on your computer, but it may be within your email. So don't just think that if you like run Cookie Cleaner on your computer that that's going to fix your email, because it's your email account. We use a secure email, but I don't think anything is foolproof. You can't be guaranteed. But I think the big takeaway is that if the funds that your parties are bringing are over $1,000, it has to come by a federal wire, not cash, not a money order, not money in advance, not an ACH, not an interbank transfer, through the federal wire system. And then just be very, very careful how that happens. Doesn't affect your earnest money, really doesn't change that at all. Thanks, everybody.